There's a cover book at the case office. This is how accurate they try to make you.
Yeah?
That's how accurate they try.
No, this is me, here.
Are you in a cover book?
I think that's a good likeness. That looks like me, huh? That would be, over at this table would be, this is, Corey and that's Joe.
I like it. Corey looked like this a little.
Did you draw that picture, Chris?
No, that was based on Hunter from when I was. That's the one that built.
Yeah, I know.
Was he wearing a hood?
Wow. Okay.
They try to make you as accurate that they can be.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. We're gonna put the,
I didn't even think, we can, if you want.
yeah, let's put the PowerPoint up there.
Don't mess up like the first session where you showed an ad that they cut off.
Jeez, tough crowd forever. Yeah. Chris has been at every single one of them. So
Yes.
yeah, these are most of the or critic, depending on.
City clerk.
Okay. All right, cool. How you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Usual wastewater session.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what it means.
Yeah, I mean,
Hasn't been raining. So.
yeah.
We don't do anything.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. We all just.
Yeah.
Is this barbecue breakfast?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what's going on when I'm there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's every day.
Excuse me, a little high.
Oh, nice. Oh, this is a fun event.
Right, I'm going.
It's a personal budget?
Yeah, you're the one. Well, you and Chris, of course.
All right. I'll let you ask the first few questions.
I don't even know the budget questions.
Oh, come on, get out of
Just
town.
wing it, yeah.
This guy's fucking. Leaking today, he gonna miss out, bro.
I know.
You gonna miss out, you're gonna watch at home most likely.
Catch you in.
Please.
So CDM.
Well, at least your sister mom will get involved with it.
That's where I want. If she gets in
Yeah, it's for the first time, so I said.
First time?
3,000. First
I don't think
3,000.
so.
I'm going to the one Pride celebration.
Is there, I mean, they're giving money to.
I'm going to the one on the 22nd
Oh, nice.
in April.
Okay.
And also the last game, they're giving out the
Also
first
not
3,000
me,
fans,
so I can't.
fanny packs.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you want to go on the Barbie and Boston Fleet.
Yeah, I
Fanny
think we're
pack.
ready.
use this sponsor or help sponsor podcasts and stuff. Please.
There it is.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Did you get any checks?
Checks. No. Should I be? I mean, I get lots of
You
checks.
didn't get one from the police department?
A lot of excise tax.
No.
Uh-oh.
I'm gonna tell you my crazy week.
Okay.
Because you got like 15 different places you go.
Somehow the punchline is a check from LG, though.
It's crazy. This is what.
All right, let's
You
do
said
it.
it's crazy,
You know
that
that
was chunks.
Yeah.
They just opened up in
Glad
this
you said
Merrimack.
Oh,
So
yes.
they invited us to go to the Grand.
I was heading to the
Yeah.
downtown neighborhood association
I'm
meeting.
like, all right, yeah,
It was at Canal Street.
yeah. Every city person who went there.
It was there. LTC still.
Now, I did hear from
That's
the
what I
assistant
added,
chief
that,
about a check.
they're still doing church
They
from
wanted
their
to
houses.
donate to, the assistant fire chief.
That's
Okay,
good.
so you didn't hear from the police yet?
No.
They got the big one, sitting in the thing, and he goes.
I feel so bad for you. What waste of your season tickets.
It's like over Winfield.
I was like,
10 grand.
I don't want anybody to get 10 grand. You should ask me for 10 grand. This guy's giving me 10 grand. And we want to be part of your community. You know, it's all.
I didn't think the church was that big.
No.
Came on $1,000 check.
Wow.
Hold on. Hey, is that the new church probably on East Merrimack?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're not done yet.
Recently constructed.
And to
Yeah,
the
it's
fire
reconstructed.
lieutenant who's here, I
Yeah,
want
that's
to
the
say
one.
thank you for everything you do.
He
I
joked.
got $15,000 check
How are you,
to
sir?
do on High
All
Street
right.
in Ruby Street. And I was like,
You're okay.
He jokingly said that BFP is going to be for me.
Yes, right. That is
Jokingly
what,
said.
Keen.
We had key parking for Chris over
Yeah.
the
reserve.
nurse sits next to me. And he goes into our police department. And thank you for everything you do.
Yeah,
We
and
want
this
you
what
to
happened
fight
the
for
moment after
We
the
love what
event.
you do. Here's the one they wanted to give to, what is we do?
Oh, she's the Friends of Association.
How are you guys?
Good. So,
Doing all right.
could be, yeah. And maybe, this is fine. The thing with the fire department is a little bit.
On, yeah, he said high
That was
school.
crazy. Which is, they sort of. Yeah, that's what it was better. It makes more sense and stuff. Making coffee, buying lunch and all that stuff. This is more like.
That's the problem, because before,
So we would do this.
like, this is like square, right? It's like the same number.
King's
It's way in there.
Okay, that I haven't heard.
They originally hired us.
Well, I don't want that to happen.
Like, after seeing that one, just between this one.
Also, can you go back? I like, no, that one. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know,
Like, aesthetics wise, you like.
yeah.
It's so each project. So I'm sure it'll be processed. And it's like a. Still drinking from the fire.
Yeah.
Austin, how was the,
These are the days.
Austin,
Right, that's it. Smart.
how was the detonate? Was that well attended?
We have one.
Member.
Good response on that. Yeah, we are getting feedback from people who are watching it online. That's why I'm gonna kick it off. Yep.
Thank you all very much for attending today. This is DPW Public Listening Session. This is our third public listening session. I want to say thank you very much to the CFO and the entire team that is here. To everyone watching at home, we'll be going through a slide presentation about what is happening throughout Department of Public Works, taking questions from anybody that has anything from the audience or even probably checking in with the CFO. So at this time, I want to say thank you again to the CFO, the Assistant CFO for putting this together. I'm going to hand it back over to Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Ball to start the presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and again, thank you everyone who's joining us here or watching this now or later on LTC. Appreciate the partnership of LTC to bring these to folks at home. As the manager mentioned, my name is Connor Baldwin. I'm the Assistant City Manager / CFO. Joining me this evening, to my right is the Deputy Commissioner for Administration and Finance from DPW, Mr. Brendan Flynn. To my left, Deputy CFO Austin Ball, the Chief Utility Officer Aaron Fox, and Executive Director of the Wastewater Utility, Evan Walsh. We do expect the DPW Commissioner to be with us tonight as well. Tonight is going to be focused on the DPW in the larger sense, so that includes the utilities. We're going to provide some information. If there's any question and answer, we'd be happy to go through some discussion at the end. But the purpose of this and all of our meetings, this is the third of 5 listening sessions that we've scheduled for FY 2027, is to hear from the community the priorities, but also to provide information on the budget to the community outside of the formal hearing process, which can be somewhat cumbersome or later in the spring, right before a vote needs to be taken by the city council. And so hopefully this information can be digested, and then by the time we get to the hearing, residents, business owners, interested community members can come to the hearing with their questions in hand, and we can have a more full, robust discussion about the budget. So the goal of tonight's session is transparency. We want residents, taxpayers, and stakeholders to understand how the city funds and manages its public works, including water and the sewer services. We also want to hear from you, So please hold your questions, and we'll open the floor at the end for question and answers. First, I'd like to walk through the agenda for tonight. We're going to start with an overview for how infrastructure is funded at the city level. At the last listening session, we did a little bit more of a deep dive into debt and how debt works. So part of the department discussion will include some capital in DPW, like roads, sidewalks, bridges, and then in the utilities there, capital projects for underground utility improvements. From there, we're going to walk through the DPW operations and the general fund budget. We're going to focus on the numbers from FY 2026. We'll allude to some of the challenges in FY 2027, but because the City Council has not been presented with the 2027 budget yet, we'll be using figures from the 2026 budget to put this in context. And then at the end, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues from wastewater and water to discuss a little bit about the ongoing CSO separation work and the enterprise funds in general. So we'll discuss DPW and the enterprise capital plan, the multi-year investments being made in infrastructure by the city, by the administration, and with support from the City Council. And then finally, we're going to open it up for question and answer. So we have a lot of ground to cover, and we've tried to make the financial information as accessible as possible. So if something isn't clear, please stop me in between. Before we get into the specific numbers, it's important to understand how the city structures its finances, because the accounting framework shapes everything that we do. So there's a sort of delineation on the screen between DPW and water, and this is an example of, they're separated into the two funds, major funds, or well, three on the utility side that fund them. DPW operations like road maintenance, parks, solid waste, engineering, facilities, and cemeteries are funded through the city's general fund. The general fund is the main operating fund for the city. It's supported by three primary revenue sources. One is taxes, and that means property taxes, both real and personal property, excise taxes on a vehicle, and to a much smaller extent here in Lowell, boat excise and some of our neighboring municipalities along the coast. That is a larger portion of their revenue, but here in Lowell, there are some boats, and it's a very small amount of excise tax that we get for them. But together they represent a significant share of the municipal revenue. The largest share, though, comes from state aid, and we talked about this in the first session, but that is delineated into two major categories: UGA, unrestricted general government aid, which is what pays for everything other than the schools, essentially, and then Chapter 70 education aid from the state. That pays for education. It is only used for education. The city receives monthly disbursements from the state, from the local aid program, and so every month we receive 1/12 of our annual appropriation from the state. The Chapter 70 money goes right to the schools. It is one component of the net school spending formula, and that is a major funding source for the Lowell Public School District and for many gateway cities, most gateway cities, and for most school districts throughout the Commonwealth. And that was something that was initiated by the Education Reform Act of the 90s, and then further built out by the Student Opportunity Act of 2019. The other major revenue source are what we call local receipts, and that's sort of everything else. Things like permit fees, fines, departmental revenues. These are, if you use a service with the city and have to pay for a permit, building permit maybe, or a license of any sort, those all get lumped into this category we call local receipts. On the expenditure side, general fund spending is divided into two major categories. Personal services is one, and these are statutory. We didn't make up these names. These come from the general laws of the Commonwealth. Personal services is what we call everything that's a salary. So those are salary and wages permanent, salary and wages overtime. Some departments have different salary types. I'm thinking of the police department and fire department that have lots of different types of pays. Those all together are what we call personal services. In those other departments, things like shift pay or shift differential, certain buybacks, et cetera, those are all personal services. And then everything else, all the expenditures of the department for pens and paper, machines, equipment, rental, et cetera. We call all of those things ordinary expenses. So if you were ever to look at the appropriation order for the city in any particular year, you'll see that each department is broken out into two categories on the vote for personal services and ordinary expenses. Now, within the budget and within the department details, we break those up into further classification. But the general categories are personal services and ordinary expenses. There is also capital items that, in Lowell, we do not, to a large extent, fund pay-as-you-go capital from within the operating budget. We fund that, as we mentioned at the debt listening session, through the capital budget and through the issuance of loan orders and the issuance of general obligation bonds. Those are authorized separately, as I mentioned, through loan orders, and we'll touch on those a little bit tonight. So on the other side, that's all about DPW and the general fund. The general fund is what also pays for, general government. Please, Counselor. If you could, I'm sorry, if you could step to the microphone so that the folks at home could hear you.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Does the city participate in like consolidation of older equipment, auction it off? And if so, does that go back in towards, say, capital expenditures, or is that general fund and then it's allocated?
Great question. So we do, so the disposition of all surplus equipment, real estate, et cetera, is governed by Chapter 30B. So the process by which we dispose of equipment, et cetera, we have to do a bid for it. Those receipts from the sale is a general fund receipt. However, there's a caveat. If it were a piece of equipment that belonged to the enterprise, so if the enterprise, one of the enterprise funds, whether it was water, sewer, or parking, were the fund that acquired the equipment or the asset, if it were some other piece of equipment, I suppose hypothetically we could be selling a garage in some kind of hypothetical example, then that revenue from the sale would belong to that particular fund. But most of them are general fund receipts, and we do, we do that. There are other sort of caveats that I'll mention where sometimes we can enter into cooperative agreements with other communities where either, this is something we did successfully with fire trucks, where we entered into an agreement with another community either to buy or sell a piece of equipment that maybe is beyond its useful life to us because maybe we've purchased new equipment, but another community may be in need of that. So there is a carve-out to 30B for intergovernmental agreements, and we could dispose of certain pieces of equipment in that manner with a direct agreement with another community. Now, that only applies to either municipal to municipal, or we could do a similar agreement with an agent of the Commonwealth, meaning the state or one of its sort of sub-agencies like the community college or the university, which are all components of the state. But very good question. It does not generate a significant amount of income. Usually we use things, as I think you know, Counselor, we use them well past their useful life. So by the time they go up on the auction block, they're not worth all that much. But we do, if you think of the high school project as an example, we bought a lot of new equipment as part of that major capital project, and the equipment it was replacing, the classroom equipment, from desks to furniture, anything that's not attached to the ground, we did dispose of that. And there's a process. As long as you clear the 30B process, if nobody bids on it, then it can be essentially junked. Which did happen in some cases, but we did go through that process for a lot of surplus equipment on the high school project. So, good question. Please.
Just a real quick follow-up.
Sure.
Does it make sense to look in the future forward planning for capital improvements to try to position replacement of larger scale? So say, for example, non-enterprise accounts. So like, say, a backhoe. where it's a big ticket item for, say, Public Works, and average lifespan, depending on usage, is about 10 to 15 if you're lucky, and that's stretching it. Does it make sense to kind of try to auction those off, or is there any kind of programs available to municipalities where 7 years in, you get a decent trade-in value towards the purchase of a new, or do you have to auction it off at that point and then purchase new after you receive that?
You don't have to. There are, I mean, what I'm hearing from your question would sound more like a leasing program where, and we have had discussions in the past about, partnering with, and I want to say it's Enterprise.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, not Enterprise, meaning Enterprise Fund or Enterprise Bank, but Enterprise, the rental, they have a leasing finance organization. And we haven't done that, but there is a program that they offer and that others offer, some of which are on the state contract, which makes procurement more simple and straightforward, whereby, we are acquiring new, we're leasing, so it's an acquisition, but it's a lease, and then we turn them over so that we're always at, the target being that we don't have any equipment that's over a certain age. So
Does that assist with the fixed cost? Because okay, this is the cost for the lease. I have it for 6 years. At the end of the 6 years, our price isn't going to really increase.
Yes.
It's going to remain consistent, but the equipment lifespan is going to reset at the end of that time period.
yes, and I would imagine to take that one step further, and I agree with your sentiment there, Counselor, is that that would help our maintenance costs on the vehicles because it would help bring down the average age of the fleet. One of the challenges there for the city of Lowell that is historic and is that we sort of manage the fleets of each individual division of DPD independently. And so I think as we're able to, and this is something that the city has made progress in over time, it was more siloed when I started here. But the more we can centralize the fleet, the more we can take advantage of opportunities like you're sort of referencing here. Because if the Parks Division of DPW and the Streets Division of DPW are only focusing on their individual pieces of equipment, maybe there's an opportunity that either the mechanics at one can work on another to bring it a little bit further along. And so I think, there is a lot of literature out there on the benefits of a centralized fleet management that I think would benefit citywide.
Okay.
And I think if we were to move in that direction, it would provide some significant financial benefits to the city for the reasons that I think you're sort of hinting at here.
Perfect. And do you know, did we purchase any kind of maintenance plans with the significant investment in the fire apparatus that we embarked on?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure that there are products that exist for fire apparatus of that nature, but if there are, I don't believe that those were sort of baked in, although
Yeah,
I would
the
want to
service.
confirm that with the fire chief.
Some companies do offer service packages, so to say, where they come to your location and run the service and repairs right on site. So and maybe in the future it is something.
Certainly something we'll follow up on. I think it's something to talk to the fire chief about. Because it is as you know, Counselor, it's great for us now that we have all those new fire apparatus, but I think we've talked about this. They're all gonna, just like the MSBA schools that were built in the 90s, they're all gonna hit a certain point at the same time. And that's gonna cause a significant impact
thank
to
you
our
very much.
finances. Of course. So to dive back to water and sewer, those are enterprise funds, and I use that word. I'll define it a little bit for the public. Under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53F and a half, a city is authorized to establish enterprise funds for utilities like water and sewer. There are other eligible activities, although they're not limitless under the law. So the city also operates a parking enterprise using an enterprise fund. Recreation is another type of enterprise fund that other communities use. You will find smaller towns in Massachusetts that operate a golf course as an enterprise fund. We don't do that here, but coming back to water and sewer, it's legally designed to be a self-sustaining revenues collected from ratepayers, those meaning your water and sewer bills. Those are expected to cover all the costs of the enterprise, including personal services, like I said, salary and wages, ordinary expenses, all of the costs of professional services, maintenance contracts, et cetera. And in the case of the enterprise funds, also the debt service. So any capital that you'll hear from Mr. Walsh and Mr. Fox later for what they're doing to comply with the consent decree from the EPA, all of that debt that's incurred to comply will be serviced by the enterprise fund and the rates of each of the sewer enterprise specifically. So this structure means that water and sewer customers are, in effect, paying the full cost of those systems. We bill them together, and I think most residents of Lowell don't necessarily think that they're going to two different places because you get one bill. You get one bill where you pay for your water, your sewer, and your trash all on one piece of paper. But it goes when you cut us a check or you make your payment online, or if you come in and pay cash, that is then diverted to the right home by the treasurer's office and by our accounting system. So that's enough about enterprise funds. Let's talk a little bit about the DPW organization. Please, Mr. Faria, how you doing today?
So I just had a quick question, and I don't know if you touched on it yet, but I think one of the fairly large items that are in an enterprise fund are indirect costs. And generally, those are things like, maybe if an enterprise fund has to use any sort of legal services or other services that are generally out of the general fund, they get billed to the enterprise fund. Can you talk a little bit about that and like maybe what percentage of the enterprise fund that might be?
Of course. So it's a very good question. Thank you. The indirect costs are for each enterprise calculated separately pursuant to the city's enterprise fund policy, which is something that's included in the budget. And the math behind it to try to put this at a 101 level is, just as Mr. Faria mentioned, there are certain city departments that support the enterprise funds. They can't operate alone entirely. And so, there are, these are things like overhead. So, the treasurer's office that collects the bills, the city auditor's office that pays the payroll and deals with the accounting, my office, the purchasing department, because they utilize our purchasing director a lot with all the things that they buy, et cetera, et cetera. And there is those are all laid out. And for the wages, there are also indirect expenses. So same departments, but rather than the personal service, it's the ordinary expenses. We take a percentage, and I'm forgetting, health insurance and retirement. So those are the other two major components. And those are set on a calculation where we take a percentage of, whatever the average plan cost is, multiplied by the number of employees in each department. There is an indirect reimbursement to the general fund. And then for retirement, the same kind of thing. So, those employees of the enterprise funds also participate in the Lowell retirement system. This is the same in any municipality. And so a portion of those retired employees that we pay the PERAC assessment for comes back as an enterprise fund because those costs are incurred in the general fund. So it's an inter-fund transfer. Am I forgetting any?
No, that's it.
No. Okay. Yep. So those are laid out in each one of the enterprise fund budgets. They are an expense to the enterprise fund and a revenue to the general fund every year. Those are audited by our outside auditors when they do they prepare the basic financial statements every year. And then, same for water, sewer, and parking. So I hope that addresses the question. And those are, I think, detailed out in the budget, but happy to talk more about that if there's an interest. So to talk about the DPW organization, on the chart here is the org chart of the different functional areas that fall underneath the DPW overarching structure. It's one of the largest departments in city government, both in terms of the budget as well as the scope of services, so they do a lot. Mr. St. Cyr oversees all of it, all of the departments and divisions that make up Lowell's Public Works. So it's organized into, I think it's 13 functional areas, and I'll just sort of recite them. The administration, cemeteries, electrical, engineering, facilities, finance, well, I guess that's sort of the same thing, finance and administration, lands and buildings, parks, recreation, snow and ice, solid waste and recycling, streets, and sustainability. So sustainability is one of the newer add-ons to DPW, as is the facilities department. The wastewater and water utilities sit alongside these divisions, but as I mentioned before, their financial structure is a little bit different than the others. The organizational structure reflects the breadth of services DPW provides, everything from picking up your trash to maintaining traffic signals, plowing snow, mowing parks, caring for the city cemeteries. This functionally the department that touches residents' lives the most and on a day-to-day basis. So when most people think of what it is that we do, they think of DPW. So let's talk about the numbers, and then I'll try to wrap up so we can move to some other areas and hear about the utilities. So, you know, in looking at FY 2026 and to scale this and put it into perspective, the total DPW budget, inclusive of Public Works and Culture and Recreation, which is classified this way in our ClearGov budget. And I guess before I forget to mention this, for the folks watching at home and for those of you here today, please visit our website and take a look at the interactive budget book, the digital budget book through ClearGov. There's a link under the budget page. So if you navigate to departments, finance, and then budget, the first link that comes up when you go to the budget page is a link to the digital budget book. All of this financial information we'll be presenting today and in the subsequent sections is there. Please take a look at your own. If there's questions that come up for you later on, please let us know, but that's where the information lives. So the total of FY 2026 was just under $26 million, 25.8 or 25.9, which is not a huge increase over the prior year's original budget of $24.6 million. It's about 5%. So to put that growth in historical context, the DPW budget was $21.1 million in 2023 and $23 million in 2024. So this trend it's reflective of the inflationary pressures that have been on us for contracts, supplies, and services. DPW buys a lot of gas. Gas has gotten more expensive, things of that nature. The stuff that they buy, the tools, the supplies that they use have all gone up. That hits our budget just like it hits anyone's budget at home. But also the addition of certain new divisions to address the changing needs of the community. So the facilities department to try to really ramp up our and attack our issues with school facilities. So for many, many years, there was a deficit in the some of the heating and HVAC and building needs, and so we've tried to address that organizationally as well as financially. And those additional costs have been incorporated into the budget. So the three largest cost centers in FY 2026 were, number one, solid waste and recycling. So in 2026, I think it's $8.3 million, the single largest line item reflecting the cost of trash collection, recycling programs, the disposal contract, as well as the individuals, the staff in DPW that administer the program, administer the contract, the enforcement officers that are out there making sure that folks aren't putting the wrong stuff in the recycle bin, or leaving their lids up when they're not supposed to. Those salaries are paid from that division of DPW. And number two is parks at $2.8 million. The parks division maintains the city's 75 plus parks and green space. And then the streets division at number three. at $2.1 million. They cover road maintenance, patching, potholes. This is a very busy time for the streets crew now and into the next, 2 months or so. They'll be very busy cleaning up what this year's snow season has left us. And they deal with all street-related operations. Of course, during the snow season, they are the ones out there in the plows, plowing the roads, making them safe for our residents. So other notable line items include the facilities at $1.35 million, electrical at $1.1 million, and engineering at just over $1 million. The snow and ice budget, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit, is at $1.35 million, which we've held flat for many years, and there's sort of a legal rationale, and but I'll touch on that when I get into snow and ice in a few minutes. And it only tells part of the story. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about capital. And on the screen there is a selection from the FY. Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor.
If you don't mind just going back.
Please.
How come on that DPW financials, you have the lands and buildings listed twice for two separate amounts? So line 1, 594.
Yeah, good question. So some of these things, and there's a simple answer, but I'll give you the long answer first, if that's all right, Counselor. As we've transitioned to ClearGov, we dump our data from Munis into ClearGov, and it consolidates everything in a much nicer, cleaner, easy to read format. But the answer to your question is because of the City Messenger Department, which formally is part of the Lands and Buildings Division. So the Messenger Department used to be a real functioning department here in City Hall with staff, et cetera. And as that has sort of transformed into Lands and Buildings, the cost code or the org center for the electricity and the heating budgets, so they're coded as Messenger in the system. And so those costs that you see listed as lands and buildings for an actual, it's the very top one under Public Works, 600,000, 400,000 and 24, 631,000. That is the cost, not for schools, but for other municipal buildings for their electricity and heating and natural gas. So as we, make progress in dealing with the ClearGov tool, we'll make it more clear about that, but I hope that makes sense. That's what that is. It's not a separate department. It's just coded differently, and so it appears twice on the list. So to talk about, and I guess while I'm on that note, because the city does also pay for the electricity and heating for the school buildings, those are coded under the city manager's office. So the electric and the gas budgets for the schools, if you were to look for them in the city budget, you would need to look in the city manager's department, and then you would find them there. So there are many nuances to the budget. That's part of why we're having this session. Hopefully someone will watch this and that information will be useful for them sometime when they're looking at that. But this is just for city buildings that are not schools. Of course. So the organization of, if you could go to the next slide. I'm sorry, no, the capital plan. So beyond the operating budget, this city council, the prior city council, has made an incredible capital investment in the city through the capital budget. And I'm going to focus on the 2026 capital budget, but the last few years, 23, 4, 5, 6, and then moving into the 2027 budget, there has been a real investment in infrastructure, in facilities, et cetera. So I'm going to try to highlight some of the examples from 2026, but I'll address that in more detail later as well. So the total capital plan for 2026 was $36.9 million, 30 projects citywide. DPW general is how it appears in the capital plan version of the budget. And that's the single largest requesting department at $13.8 million, which was about 37% of the total requests. The other ones, and this is another nuance of ClearGov, come in under the city manager's office. Those represent things not because necessarily, although they are priorities of the city manager, it wasn't city manager Tom Golden that put those in as requests. Those are 7.6 million, but those include things like ADA improvements, et cetera. Those fall under the city manager's portion. But of the DPW projects, the funding plan for that is mostly general obligation bonds, but there is also a component of it that includes the Chapter 90 state highway funds. Chapter 90 is the name of the program of funding from the state for roads throughout the Commonwealth, and that is a component of our capital plan as well. So I want to take a minute before I turn the mic over to my friends in wastewater to talk about snow and ice, because it's that time of year, but also because it is the one thing that is of this nature. Well, not the only one. The one that is most frequently thought of. There are other instances where municipalities can deficit spend, limited number, public health emergencies, natural disasters. Those are other sort of, but those happen less frequently, thank God. It snows almost every year. So it's something we're more accustomed to dealing with. So I want to explain how that works a little bit. I don't know if we have a slide about, okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. So snow and ice is budgeted at $1.35 million in 2026. And like I said, unlike every other expenditure in the municipal budget, the city is legally permitted to spend beyond that amount without prior city council approval. That is something that changed. The mechanism by which we deficit spend changed with I think it was 2016 municipal modernization. Prior to that, there was a requirement, even in a planning form of government, for a vote of the city council to authorize deficit spending. It was sort of a pro forma vote that would happen every year, but we would bring it in, October, November before the council. Now, enough municipalities got together and lobbied the state that relief was provided in the 2016 Municipal Modernization Act. And so just a letter to the accountant, the town accountant or city auditor is required to deficit spend. So the exception derives from Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31D. And that provides that a city or town may incur liabilities for snow and ice removal in excess of the amount appropriated in the annual budget. It requires the excess to be certified and charged to the fiscal year in which it was incurred, and it must be funded through a supplemental appropriation either in the current year or raised on the tax rate in the subsequent year. Now, I say that because that is most commonly what happens. If it gets really bad, sometimes the state will come through and pass special legislation that will allow communities to amortize that debt. That happened in 2015. Folks may remember, I think Nemo was the name of the storm. At the time, we spent upwards of maybe $4 or $5 million on snow and ice operations, as did most communities in the Commonwealth. And the state passed special legislation to allow communities to amortize their outstanding liability over 3 years. But in most cases, if you can't cover it all within the year in which it was incurred, you can raise it on the next year's tax rate. And that is something that the city of Lowell has taken advantage of, but it is a exception that is worth noting. Counselor, did you have another question?
Looking at the DPW 26 capital plan here, the itemized requests, that slide there, something that's, so this would be, all of these figures would be recommendations that would be budgeted pretty much out of the upcoming budget, correct?
2026. So we're looking backwards.
Oh, backwards, okay.
Yeah, so these were funded.
Last year. Okay.
Yeah, and so we will bring a
new one
new
forward.
a new one for 27 before the council.
But my question would be,
Yep.
so I noticed last year,
Yep.
we put $1 million in the budget for the neighborhood pocket park program,
Yep.
but yet I don't believe we pursued utilizing any community preservation funds where, I mean, we've been looking for open space projects. Wouldn't that have been able to offset potentially that $1 million that we requested in the budget?
It's a good point, and yes, I think this question has come up in prior council meetings, and I think the DPD addressed this, that their focus was on managing the ARPA projects, and then once those were completed, they would start submitting requests to the Community Preservation Committee for parks funding. But yes, it would help offset these costs to the tax base for sure.
And we see it again this year.
Yeah.
We don't see any requests
Yep.
internally for open space or green
right.
space improvements out of this. And there's informational to the tune of $2 million being allocated. But again, if we have $1 million request for Parkett Parks, why wouldn't we pursue any other baskets of money to alleviate that burden from the taxpayer?
It's a good question. I think it is a good financial strategy to employ as many outside funding sources for projects that we need as we can to help mitigate the impact to the taxpayer. So whether it's Community Preservation Act, which for anybody who may be watching this that doesn't know what that is, the City of Lowell in 2019 adopted the Community Preservation Act at a 1% surcharge. So on everybody's tax bill, you are also paying a 1% surcharge into the Community Preservation Fund. And there is a requirement under the statute for that to be split up between affordable housing, parks, and historic preservation in buckets of 10% minimum. And the question from the counselor was, should we be pursuing that as a funding source for parks improvements? To which I would say yes. And it takes, there is an application process. I do believe that the Community Preservation Committee, which has sort of initial jurisdiction, although it is a multi-jurisdictional body because the council also has to vote and appropriate the funds, those will be coming before you very soon. As you mentioned, there's an informational item. It is and must be part of our ongoing future strategy to fund these and maintain these sort of historic investments that have come from ARPA. So it's well taken. There's an application process, so hopefully the staff in DPD can, start up that trajectory soon.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Very good point, though. So I got through what I wanted to get through on snow and ice, so I think, being mindful of time, let's talk about wastewater.
All right, thank you, Connor. So getting into wastewater and water departments, just a quick overview. And so for the wastewater department, four main things as part of that department is one's the Dock Island Treatment Facility. That is a 32 million gallon a day facility treating waste from the city of Lowell and the surrounding communities of Tingsboro, Chelmsford, Tewksbury, and Dracut. And so it's also one of the biggest treatment facilities in New England. And so as part of that, we not just maintain the treatment facility, but also, and operate it, but also 226 miles of sewer and 64 miles of stormwater pipe. When we say stormwater pipe, that's pipe that doesn't go to the sewer, but is discharged directly to a receiving body, so it's not treated by the treatment facility. Whereas the 226 miles, that will go to the treatment facility. We have 14 pump stations, 9 diversion stations. A diversion station is where we call combined sewer overflow takes place. And so this is when there is and it's important as we talk about the consent decree to understand this concept. When it rains in the city of Lowell, a percentage of those 226 miles of sewer will fill with stormwater. The treatment, that can get to the point where it can't be conveyed to the treatment facility, and also the treatment facility can't handle that amount of flow. And so it gets diverted into the Merrimack River at these 9 diversion stations. The utility also oversees the Centerville flood reduction system. And so this includes the Beaverbrook stop log assembly and also the emergency pump station located along Route 110. So just a quick overview of some of the financial details for the department. A couple of the biggest expenditures and a couple of things to focus on is one being the salary, 50 employees at the utility. And so that, as I said, is going to be one of our biggest expenditures. And when we get into the ordinary expenses, I think it's important to understand where a large portion of that budget goes. Utilities, as seen in the top bullet there, that represents all the gas and electricity used at the utility. I can't quite read the number from here, so. Yeah, so 1.8 million. Our largest line item is sludge removal, that, I think it's, believe that's 6.2, right, 6.1? Yep, so 6.1 million, and that's a byproduct of the treatment facility. So once the treatment happens, it produces a material called sludge, and that needs to be hauled out at roughly 90 tons a day. That is a item in the budget that has gone up every year. It is becoming more difficult each year to dispose of sludge in New England. There's less places, there's less landfills for it to go. It can no longer be land applied. And so that's something we're looking into, future cost controls there, but like as, it's just notable as our largest line item for the utility. Another large item is chemicals, and so we have to treat, and so part of that treatment is chemical usage, and so that is over $2 million, I believe it's like, yep. And so those are some of the largest expenses for the wastewater treatment facility, or the utility in general.
So I have a question. It kind of goes back to my question earlier on indirect costs. It looked like in the fiscal year 25 budget, there was about $7 million worth of indirect cost being transferred out of the enterprise fund to the general fund. And that went up to 9.7. So quick math tells me that's about a 38% increase year over year from 7 million to 9.7. What changed in that fund that would require an extra 2.7 million, being hit by the ratepayer instead of the general fund?
Sure. Well, that's a good question. What happens when the budget is set is that we produce the calculations according to the formula, and then we have to go through a sort of gut exercise as to whether the enterprise fund can afford the indirect cost. For many of the years, last few years anyways, as Mr. Ball and I have prepared the budget, it was the case, and this leads into some other somewhat esoteric financial discussions, but I'll bring them in because they're relevant. The enterprise fund can only draw down an operating deficit up to as much retained earnings as it has. Retained earnings are what we call free cash for the enterprise funds. It's essentially the same thing. It works in many ways the same, but it's called something different under the Department of Revenue rules and regulations. So and this is what happened, I believe, for both water and wastewater, and maybe parking as well. So if we go through our calculations and the amount that is the true amount is more than what the enterprise fund can afford, then we will apply essentially a discount to the enterprise fund, and that is what happened. And now the fund for wastewater has rebounded. One of the things that we're looking at this year as we're preparing the budget for FY27 is a good news story that all of the enterprise funds are performing better. And what that means is they can afford which provides commensurate relief to the general fund. They can now afford that, which is a good thing for both sides of the budget. But in those years where it can't, we have to make a sort of strategic decision, and we try to apply, maybe it's 75% of the formula, maybe it's 50% of the formula. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head, but that is an annual exercise that happens with the enterprise funds as to whether they can afford the full freight of the indirect cost allocations.
Hey, can you go to the next slide, Austin? Thank you. Yeah, so one of the big the biggest capital expenditure for the utility is driven by the EPA consent decree. So in May of 2024, the city entered a consent decree with the EPA, and this was to reduce combined sewer overflows to the Merrimack River. And what this document does is it lays out specific projects and timelines that the city is required to meet to achieve this reduction. And so this chart here shows what those different projects are, their costs, and right now the $175 million loan order supports these projects. And so like some of the big ones in there, well, they're all very large projects. We have collection system maintenance, what we call I&I reduction. That's flow into our sewer service, sewer system to try to reduce that. The Centerville Sewer Separation Project. This is the large project going on right now in Centerville. It has started construction. And then what we're calling Phase 3 is the Lower Highlands Sewer Separation Project. And so we have essentially moved all of our sewer separation projects into these two large projects. So Centerville and Lower Highlands. Lower Highlands is in the design phase right now, and the first phase of that project is out to bid. The underground storage tank over on Douglas Road, that's a $14 million project. The upgrade going on at the Duck Island wastewater treatment plant, and then stormwater compliance. So if you can go to the next page. Now I'm gonna pass it over to Mr. Walsh to talk about these projects.
Thank you. So I'll talk, question?
It's tough to work like this, but a couple questions. On your accepted sewer and your unaccepted, first, when you separate, are we separating unaccepted at the same time?
Yeah, so we'll separate the sewers within that area. Yes.
One other question. State reporting back a few years back said that you had 188 miles in 2019 of accepted, and for the stormwater, 41.3. Is this the growth that we've seen in the city since then, in the last 7 years, that has changed, or is there a number, like 40 miles more were added?
Nothing's really changed. We've improved our GIS system over the last couple of years, so it's better accounting for what we actually own.
Okay, so it's the same numbers, it's just the state has a different reporting because we just couldn't accurately report it. Okay, thank you.
So getting into some of the larger capital projects going on right now as part of the consent decree. The first one is what we're calling the Centerville Sewer Separation Program. So this was bid out. We had a notice to proceed in November of 2025 for what we're calling Phase 1, which is shown in red. So that is within the consent decree, and it has a deadline to be completed by the end of 2027. So that's why it's such an aggressive and short timeline to do this work. The utility's been proactive about public outreach for this project. We've attended all neighborhood meetings. We have our own dedicated social media site, and we have a website built out for this project and all future projects, lowellwater.com. So within the Centerville area, we're separating roughly 400 acres in Centerville. This will account for roughly 2 to 10% of our daily flow coming to the plant, which could have pretty big impacts on chemical usage and other ordinary expenses in the future once all these projects are done. As part of this project, I think Aaron alluded to, or Mr. Fox alluded to, we had roughly 64 miles of drainage pipe. This project alone will be 8 miles of drainage pipe being added in Centerville. Next project, big project we have going on is in the Lower Highlands. So this is the other sewer separation projects. Each one of these projects is broken up into 3 different phases within the project. So this is occurring around the Boys and Girls Club, Clemente Park, and an offshoot of that. This will be roughly 80 acres of sewer separation going on, and we'll be adding 3 miles of drainage pipe. The first phase, Phase 3A, which is shown in green on this map, is currently going out for bid right now, with bids closing in April, and construction will be starting roughly around August. All these sewer separation projects, as well as reducing flow to the treatment plant, also have benefits to the environment, reducing CSOs, as well as within the Lower Highlands specifically, there's been some known sanitary sewer overflows, which is sewage on the streets. So these projects will address street flooding, basement flooding, as well as CSO control. The last project I'm going to highlight that was mentioned is the storage tank on Douglas Road. This is located in the Colley Stadium parking lot. This is a 1.83 million gallon treatment tank, or just not treatment, but tank, to store flow during wet weather events. There's significant flooding that usually occurs on Douglas Road, and this will store flows up to a 25-year storm. This is currently underway. The concrete slabs have been poured for the floor of the walls, and they're currently working on the roof. The tank, or the big hole that's, if you're driving by right now, will be covered and filled in around May, June timeframe. So that's the current plan, operational by the fall, and that's when the neighborhood will see the realized benefit of this project.
moving up to the water utility. Water utility treating over, providing clean drinking water to the residents of the city, and we're producing over 4 billion gallons annually, about 11 million a day. We're maintaining 215 miles of distribution mains, so those are the large pipes that bring the water to people's homes, and along with roughly 2,400 hydrants. And so in there's 26,000 service connections, so that's the service connections that go from the mains to people's homes, residents and businesses. And so we also manage treatment, plant filters, pump stations, and water towers throughout the city, and that kind of makes up our water utility. Similar to the wastewater utility, personnel is a large portion of the operating budget, and some of the other items include electricity as one of the larger, and I just can't see the number, unfortunately, on the page.
Electricity?
Yes.
1.2 million?
Yeah, so 1.2 million for electricity. Chemicals, I believe that says 1.7 million is another one of the very large budget items. And just to point out, we also do carbon filters, and those are about $200,000, and so those are all various treatment items and some of the larger budget items for the utility. And so with a $99 million loan order, the city, or the utility is moving forward with several capital projects over at Water, and that includes an upgrade to the water treatment facility. And this upgrade will center around an electrical upgrade. That'll include generators and power switching, and really an updating of old electrical equipment, along with meters and some treatment for chemicals. So there are Rourke Bridge water main, so this is a water main that'll run over the new Rourke Bridge, supplying water to that side of the city, and for that at $10 million. General water main improvements, yep.
Just to add to the Rourke Bridge project real quick. So the main over the bridge, it's gonna be broken into 2 phases. So the main over the bridge isn't going to cost 10 million. There's gonna be a second phase as part of that project to connect it to an existing 20-inch line. And that's where the realized benefit will occur with that project.
So also water main improvements, distribution improvements. So the city's gonna be doing a lead service line, where we'll be identifying lead services within the city and removing those lines. We're gonna do a large meter replacement project, and we have money set aside for vehicle replacement within that capital plan. So, I think that's it.
Okay, so being mindful of the time, again, just gonna sort of wrap us up here. Just want to thank everybody very much who came to join us or who's watching this at home. Hopefully this was informational for those interested in DPW. We will be having the public budget hearing in May. Our projected date to bring the first, is that the public hearing? Yeah, the 19th of May is our projection date for the public hearing on the budget. Our next listening session for, as we continue on our traveling roadshow, is April the 7th at 5 p.m. here in the mayor's reception room. We'll be talking about the Department of Planning and Development, some of their capital projects, et cetera, some of the projects they're working on. We did get a note that there was an extended warranty purchased on the fire apparatus, which was a question that came up, so wanted to provide that for the folks here. But I want to thank, the utility, DPW, for helping present and compile all of this information, Mr. Ball, for bringing this idea and program forward to you all, and just want to thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next time.
I'm just eye candy.